I think we need to remember the Sultana because these were real people. These were somebody's father, somebody's brother, somebody's son, my great-great-grandfather. These were real people, and they gave their lives for our country in a tragic way. And we need to remember and support them because then they never die.
The story of the Sultana is as compelling as any of the battles fought in the Civil War. The death toll, the destruction and tragedy equally as great as any battle. And it's a story that needs to be told because it has affected so many thousands of lives, not only at the time of the event, but also down through history. It's an event that is equally as great as most of those events in the war itself. It happens to be the greatest disaster in American maritime history. It needs to be told because those voices still cry out through their descendants for recognition.
At Memphis, we have the Memphis National Cemetery, beautiful 40-acre cemetery, opened in 1867. And today, if you go out there, you'll find 23 graves of men that died on the Sultana. And the hundreds and hundreds of bodies that were recovered of soldiers, Union soldiers, are buried at the Memphis National Cemetery in graves that just say unknown U.S. soldier. And to me, that's kind of a footnote on why so few people know about the Sultana. The nation really forgot about these men. And to me, it's one of the greatest tragedies in American history.
The story of the Sultana is such a tragic story. It deserves to be told and understood as part of the history of this country by our citizens. And if we can do something via a museum to help afford the Sultana story its rightful place in history, then I think having the museum is helpful for that.
1994, 1995, we really started thinking, boy, would it be nice to have a museum. I had a display of Sultana artifacts at the Kenosha Civil War Museum in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Louis Intras heard about this and wanted to know if I would be willing to loan him all of my artifacts. And I said yes. And so he put up a display at the University of Arkansas. And then a couple years later, he put one up in Marion, Arkansas, got a really good response, followed up with a second one in a little shopping center, a little better location. He got a really good response.
We decided to open a small museum. We felt we could create something that would grab the local attention, if not national attention. And we formed a 501c3 called the Sultana Historic Preservation Society, Inc. And the acronym, of course, for that is SHIPS, SHPS.
It was formed for the purpose of remembering the greatest maritime disaster in American history. And not only that, but also those passengers who survived that disaster and also those that lost their lives. My role is simply to lead a very talented board, to organize the meetings that we have as a board. We have monthly meetings, and in trying to raise money to establish a permanent museum for the Sultana.
In 2015, we did the 150th anniversary of the sinking of the Sultana and hosted the Sultana Descendants Association. So they were in town for that in 2015, and that's when we officially opened the museum that we have now.
With the great support of the mayor, Frank Fogelman in Marion, and a lady by the name of Rosalind O'Neill, we were able to obtain a small building, and we opened the first small museum.
We've actually established, primarily courtesy of Mr. Gene Saliker, of some period artifacts and some historically relevant items that we have on display that pertain to the Sultana and help in some small way or large way Further the story, as I said earlier, it's an interesting story. It's an intriguing story. And in my role as mayor, I have promoted the idea that I felt like that we could accomplish two things. We could help inform, educate, make the public aware of the story pertaining to the Sultana, and it's a multifaceted story.
We've had visitors from all 50 states and 14 foreign countries.
When I went over a couple of weeks ago, and the group that came through the museum were the members of one of the camps of the Sons of the Confederacy. So they had a pretty good knowledge of the Civil War. But I think just listening to them talk and comment about all the artifacts and the incredible display of the model of the Sultana that Gene had refurbished, they got a new appreciation for the Union soldiers who were on that boat and what they had gone through. And that was so refreshing and so encouraging to me to see those men that obviously knew a lot about the Civil War, how fascinated they were with the story. That's the purpose of the museum, to tell the story that has never been told before.
Originally, we had it set up where you come into like the first area room and you see a little bit about the Sultana. You go a little bit further, you see a little bit about Cahaba and Andersonville. You turn around, you see the 14-foot model of the Sultana. You sort of get a feel of what the boat looked like. Then on some of the other cabinets, we had some of the pieces of the Sultana, the fire brick, the shaker plates. And then we went more into the story of how some of these guys survived. And then the Sultana Survivors Association, reunion ribbons, their flags and such on the wall. We now have so many artifacts for the museum that we don't even have room to display them all. We really need a large permanent museum that will be laid out to help people see a flow.
When I was a student at Arkansas State University, I loved to take history classes. And one class I had was taught by supposedly the authority on Arkansas history. And after class, I asked him why there was no mention of the Sultana. And he had no idea what I was talking about.
The museum, what I envision is when you walk into the museum, you're going to become acquainted with many of the men and passengers who were on the Sultana on her last voyage upriver. And the museum is going to tell their stories, and people are going to leave the museum with a great appreciation for what those men and women went through and what they did for our country.
The acquisition of the building that we're going to utilize is nearly 18,000 square foot building. We've been able to acquire it. It is a historic building. It's a WPA project building, the first Marion Public School gymnasium. It will be completely renovated and preserved, I might say.
I am very, very satisfied with the building as we have. It's very tall. It's got great lighting with the skylight windows. It's in a wonderful location right along Military Road, right in the heart of Marion, close by City Hall, close by the school. We want to add on about a 5,000 square foot addition in front of it, where we would have a theater, a gift shop, an entryway. And then the existing building as it stands right now would be the main part of the exhibit. They do have some rooms off to the side, and we would take and utilize those as temporary exhibit rooms where you would have an exhibit that might be there for 6 months, and then you change it to another exhibit for another 6 months, as they do in a number of other museums. And this is to get people that want to come back. They have classrooms, they have a little library study room, they have an acquisition room, there's an orientation theater, there's actually another theater that could be rented out or used for the Sultana Festival, speakers and such. So I like the layout that they've come up with. And just recently I was able to see a couple of artist conceptions of what the actual inside will look like. And again, I'm very, very pleased. I think they're doing a wonderful job.
Mr. Salaker has noted that the museum needs to be greater than what we currently have, which we've all agreed to. We actually acquired a different piece of property that had a residential house on it, and we tore the house down, and it's next to our public library, and we thought it would be a good place. Well, the more we talked, the bigger we got, and the story got out. The school has done some building changes, and they had some issues pertaining to the building. Not that there was anything wrong with the building, but children had to walk across a major 2-lane highway to get to the gym for their daily PE activities, and the school had rathered that they not do that. Taxpayers approved a bond millage to do some construction jobs for the school, one of which was a new gym on the same side of the highway that the campus is on.
The school has deeded the 1938 gymnasium to the city, of course, with the understanding that the school will continue to use it until their new gym is completed. In the past year, or almost a year, we have donations and pledges to the new museum of over $1.2 million. Now, it sounds like a lot, but our goal is $7.5 million. A key figure in all this is we have to raise $3 million before, or have commitments of $3 million before we can begin construction.
We're excited about the direction that this is going. So we're doing the tough work now. We're trying to raise money to fund the museum. And one of my goals as mayor has been that we can get the museum up and going and make it operational. And it doesn't divert a dollar of budget from any other departments that already exist within the city. We hope that this can be a freestanding operation on its own.
And right now, we're in a really good position. We just need help. We need to make sure that we reach that $3 million mark so that we can build a first-class museum. That won't be enough to do it, but that will allow us to get started. The actual cost of the museum is just short of $4 million. But once we reach $3 million, I have no doubt we'll be able to raise the $4 million. The additional money beyond that is for architects' fees and things like that, and also to provide, hopefully, an endowment so that we will have money to operate and run the museum, to maintain the museum. We can use that money along with the money that's produced from admissions and store sales from the museum store.
The state of Arkansas is attempting to raise funds. There are some Arkansas senators and representatives that are introducing bills to try to help fund our museum.
We have hired a capital campaign executive out of Little Rock that is spearheading the capital campaign.
No donation is too small. We have had commitments so far, the city has committed over $500,000 to the project, but just locally, we've had commitments of, on the larger side of $150,000 to commitments of simply $50. No donation is too small, and if anyone is willing to donate, they can either go to our website and donate through that site, or they can send a check made payable to the Sultana Historical Preservation Society to P.O. Box 211 in Marion. Once we have raised the $3 million, the building itself will be transferred on a long-term lease to the Sultana Historical Preservation Society, and we will be responsible for all the construction, and once it's completed, we will be responsible for the maintenance and operation and running of the museum.
I can envision bus loads of school children stopping at the museum, getting out, walking through the doors, and becoming fascinated by the story. When children walk through the museum and they see the Sultana, the model, and they see all the stories of the men, that they're gonna have a new appreciation for what America stands for, and the fact that there were many men like John Clark Ely that gave it all so that they could have the freedom that they now have. And I think it's going to be just an incredible educational tool for generations to come.
We want people to learn the story of the Sultana, and we want them to understand the true magnitude of that event, that it was one of the great events, and it was the last great tragedy of the Civil War.
I want our museum to be the place where people could come to and get the final answer on the Sultana.
Regardless of whether it's in Marion, Arkansas, or Memphis, Tennessee, or somewhere else, this museum has got to have it. The most important thing the new museum can accomplish is to help the Sultana's story to take its rightful place in history.
We're setting the stage for the future, that people will long remember the Sultana and the men and people that were on it.
It's such an interesting story, and I think that the more people know all the details of the Sultana and all the information that is constantly being unearthed, it's a huge, huge story. And I think the community would develop a real sense of pride around the Sultana, and the fact that the city of Marion and the Sultana Historical Preservation Society is making the effort to preserve this story.
The museum that tells this story that we can all share in, that unites us, it provides us with tangible proof of the story that we're all learning together, the story that we share, that story and those stories that unite us together as one community or one country. Museums give us the proof of who we are.
I think the people that were on board the Sultana would be so proud of what we're doing.
There was one survivor in, I think, 1928 that was played a role in trying to get a national monument put together or erected to the memory of those that died on the Sultana. And of course, the government never did it. The federal government never did it. And he, shortly before he died, wrote, "To be so soon forgotten by the American people, and the American government doesn't speak well of either." And when I think about the museum, I think that he would say, "Thank you. You finally told our story. And finally, we're not going to be forgotten." And that is why I think that all of us associated with the museum are so passionate about the museum, because it will be the incredible vehicle that people will learn. They'll be used to tell people the story that has been too long forgotten.
When Major Will McTeer, adjutant of the 3rd Tennessee Cavalry, learned of the Sultana's fate the morning after the disaster, he wrote,
"In the bosom of the Mississippi, they found their final resting place. No stone or monument marks that spot. There is no tablet with their names, not even a hillock to which friends and survivors can go. Flowers are strewn over the graves in the cemeteries of our dead, yet there are no flowers for those who went down on the Sultana. But let us remember them."